Linker, you made countless videos on how early stargazing is the best approach, but how do I know when to start transitioning? What do I stand to gain or lose, and what are the other opinions that go into this topic? I get these questions all the time, so in the past I brought Ameby. He's a big 4 faction enthusiast to talk on a podcast. It was a good opener at the time, but it wasn't all focused on gazing versus 4 faction. We sneak peeked into his Hero Core Synergies guide, which later influenced my ultimate guide to the game. However, today we're going to set the record straight. I brought Arty on stream. He's an awesome endgame content creator despite being a 4 faction advocate. And after having some fun data mining and having him roast my account, we had a debate over Twitch. Definitely tune into the streams link below, but for now, like, subscribe, we'll roll the intro splash, and then we'll dive right into the most in-depth talk I know about 4 faction versus stargazing. So today, Arty, I think you know what we're going to do, but I'm just going to quickly clarify it to people just tuning in. We're going to debate 4 faction versus stargazing. So 4 faction, these are different approaches to building your arsenal. Stop me if you feel like I'm saying stuff that you disagree with.
You're fine.
So 4 faction is where you focus on the prime 4 factions, being Lightbearers, Maulers, Wielders, and Graveborns. So this is going to be a building approach. You focus on these heroes, you summon them through the tavern, buff their signature items and furniture. And through that, because they cost less than the other option, you're able to quickly set up a very strong arsenal. And then you can prepare yourself head on, you can get heroes faster. Do you feel like that's an accurate representation before we get into the spicy part?
I'd say that's a good way to describe it.
All right. And then the right approach is going to be... sorry.
Oh, I can see how this one will go.
All right. The other approach is going to be stargazing. So this is the approach when you talk about stargazing in the context against 4 faction. This means that at some point after chapter 15, when you unlock the possibility to stargaze, you start transitioning away from the Noble Tavern. You stop summoning at first in the Noble Tavern, and then later even choice summons less. It's kind of a slow transition, and obviously it can move up and down. But over time, you begin to stargaze more and more and summon less and less. So this allows you to get, obviously, Celestial and Hypogean heroes. The chances for summoning them are minuscule. It's really suboptimal getting them through the tavern. Of your choice. So you get to choose the hero that you stargaze. You get to kind of customize your set and build them on. The minus to that is that stargazing costs much more, and the cost, the chance that you have to get heroes is much less. The rewards are also different, so we're going to get into all of that in just a second. But would it be true to say that you advocate 4 faction, generally speaking?
I do advocate 4 faction.
Okay, so go ahead, Arty. Why won't you, I'll let you start. Why won't you make the case for why 4 faction is the superior approach?
So I think the first thing that you have to look at is the amount of gazing heroes and the amount of faction heroes. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, there is a total of, I think, about 15 Celestial / Hypogean heroes.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, there's obviously a wider variety of heroes to pick from when it comes to 4 faction. And within the 4 faction, I think one thing to look at in the game is that there is not any bad heroes. I do not think there is any hero in the game who I would call useless. There are some Olmuses, there are some Chimera's, there are some very bad heroes, but even the worst of heroes still have decent levels of success.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a whole, though, the average faction hero is going to be easier to build than a Celestial Hypo, and given the 5 fights needed early on in 34 and 35, I think that building a wider roster of heroes that you can invest into better Celestial Hypos and then just very minimal support.
I already kept it short, so I'm going to keep it short too. The case for stargazing. First, stargazing is oriented towards the endgame. This means that if you're planning to end your progression in chapter 32 or 33, if you're not planning towards later chapters, I'll grant that 4 faction is better. I'm talking about specifically endgame, so I'm talking about chapter 34, 35, and forward right now. And the argument for stargazing within those is that the heroes that you stargaze are, first, significantly more effective even at their price point, when you compare the rewards, than their 4-faction relatives. Second, it's a more effective use of resources because the fodder that you get ends up becoming useless. At some point, you do end up getting all the heroes. So if you're talking about min-maxing your investments, you see that the 4-faction progression that you will receive will at some point just kind of dim down. And third, it allows you to flex into wider cores and better sets as a whole. So you're able to, within the same amount of investments, put out better formations, be able to compete at lower powers. You get better campaign utility, you get better PvP utility, and overall, you're able to make the most out of the game with the same amount of investment.
All right. I think one thing that I at least want to focus on is the progression curve, as I'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you progress from early to mid to late to end.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, at the moment, it's rather quick, I would say. Moving on past that, a 240 crystal right now, assuming you are on a carry of either Iron or Daemon, who I would say are the only two relevant carries towards that point, and the two I would pick besides Ainz. I would say at that, you're going to be at about chapter 26, 27 already.
Mm-hmm.
And that's before 6 ascended heroes. Even into 34, 30, even into 33, 34, you're hitting chapter 34 right now at, I think, level 340, 350.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you're not going to have the time when gazing to ascend heroes to even go past the crystal cap.
All right. So basically, you're saying, look, like if I get you correctly, but correct me if I'm saying this wrong. Progression curve is stiff, and games are going to hit you before you know it. Like you're going to get, like, if you think you're stuck in the mid game, just wait until you get to the end game. And by then, you're going to run out of roster. Like your roster is going to fall short. So if you want to put up a decent team by the end game, by the later chapters, once you progress towards the chapters that you mentioned, you're going to need to put up 4-faction. There's like little alternatives. Am I getting you right?
Little efficient alternatives, yes.
So, all right. So this is the part, chat, where we start the banter. This is the part where we start actually arguing. Up until now, we were cool.
Peace was never an option.
With the new endgame, the way the chapter right now campaign is focused, you can get away with having one set up to chapter 31. That's the same as it was. But you also, like, the endgame was delayed in two senses. First of all, because the sets get stronger over time, you have more time to gather your arsenal. You have more time to make that sacrifice. Because I think, sure, if you're trying to make progress within a week, you'll see more progress when you do 4-faction, because you'll have more time for summons, you'll have more summons as a result. Stargazing is a stiff curve, because if you look at Stargazing, obviously, and this is like the one thing that I hear people that argue for 4-faction say all the time, this is something to this effect. Stargazing costs like 500 diamonds. You multiply that by the 2% that you have for the hero, because you can see here the chances. 2% chance to get the hero. And this is going to be 2. This is going to be 1 in 50 times 500. So for each copy of a gazed hero, you need 25,000 diamonds. This is the case I usually hear. But then to ascend them, what do you need? You need 14, or is it 12? 14, right? 14.
14, yes.
So the case is that this is the amount of diamonds you need. 350,000 diamonds per ascended Celes hypo. And that's the case I see made. Like, people usually do is they say, look, you have people like Romos, he's the biggest hoarder in the game, he has 1 million diamonds. So like, if you start like the whole thing, like your use of resources is really inefficient. So now that I de-strawmanned your argument, I added some stuff in there. Hard disagree. You get events. I think this is the biggest thing that people miss. And you get other rewards. I think that you're able to put up a decent set to address the first part of that argument. If you're getting like 4 or 5 decent like carry heroes, let's say 8 ascended heroes, you're able to use some dimensional, obviously, to kind of close that cap. You're able to use 4 or 5 of them to put up a decent set. And I feel like that's a goal you can achieve as early as chapter 21 or 22 if you optimize what you're doing. These are going to be very good heroes, like 5 good heroes out of 8 ascended total. Or alternatively, if chapter 24, if you haven't been as effective, but as early as chapter 22, you can put out a decent roster of 8 ascended heroes, out of which 5 viable to carry you all the way to 31. And then all the way to 31, and this is like that part of the curve, right? This is the part where it starts getting stiff, like around the mid game. Here you get all the time in the world to get 2 heroes or 3 heroes, depending on like how lucky you are, obviously, and stuff like that. You use events. And what you do is you Stargaze Twins and you Stargaze Lucretia. And with these 2 heroes alone, you're able to put out 2 incredibly efficient endgame sets that come on top of whatever carry you're using, whether it's like the Aaron that you said or the Daemon that you said.
I think making mistakes and spending are the 2 ways where this conversation completely changed.
All right,
I think for spending,
like,
gazing is usually better.
Not an issue. Like, I'm putting both of these aside. Obviously, like if I put spending in the mix, obviously it gets much more in my favor, and if I put errors into the mix, it gets much more in yours, I feel. But let's leave both of these to the sideline, even though mistakes are way more common than spending. So I'm doing myself a favor.
I think I can agree on that. That's a very fair point.
Assuming optimal play, when do you think you could get 1 decent carry set?
Around chapter 20. That's usually when you've got your Iron or your Daemon, or sometimes like an Isolde or a Saurus at good copy. Your first meta carry.
Right.
The 4th carry, usually at this point, you aren't prioritizing any carries past this. You can ascend them, but you aren't really putting investment into them.
So what
you don't usually
here?
build until 32. But at this point, what you're doing is you're building up supports, or like this is when you're putting some investment into your Tasi, your Namora. Kind of, you're investing in the supports for these. When you're going to get your Pharah up, your Leica's going to get up if it's not already.
Okay.
This is when your investment already into supports.
I want to talk to you about this a little bit.
Okay.
I think you could dim link, like if you have a 9s, that goes a little bit earlier, because then anything you get is a viable carry hero.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
But let's play devil's advocate here. Okay, second meta carry at 23. Now allow me to ask you, why do you need a second meta carry at 23? Like, if you have a Daemon or an Aaron, why would you need another one?
Because usually the late game sets are double carry oriented. Usually it's an Iron and a Daemon, or an Iron and a Sophia, or like Daemon and Pharah. Usually you are pairing 2 carries together at these optimal late game sets.
But why would you need that? Do you think, how much do you think is the marginal gain between these 2, the first meta at 20 and the second meta at 23? Let's say I have a Daemon set, and I'm using, like, I don't know, like a Thoran, a Brutus, something like, I don't know, a Rowan, and like a Rando, like Ulmus. What's the difference if it's Ulmus or if it's like, I don't know, like Odin?
I think the difference between these 2, I'll just give an example with the Daemon set, like you said. I think, let's say Thoran, Brutus, Rowan, and Daemon would be used in both sets. And it's kind of a difference of how fast, first of all, do you the Thoran, because the Thoran isn't nearly as good of a tank, into if you're already spending these diamonds on stuff, you're going to have that Thoran at Ascended, or your alternate carry at Ascended, as well as your next hero already being built. I'll just say, for example, Pharah. Let's say Pharah versus Nara. Let's say Nara would be the budget option just to disrupt a hero versus Pharah, who can do it more consistently. Assuming you're 4-factioning, you'd have this Pharah built up. You're already getting the anti-heal with Daemon. You're getting the anti-heal blood shield with Daemon, better disrupt, and better survivability in a fight. And I think your progress is going to, if you were using the budget option, if you're Nara and you're Stargazing, I think you would hit between going from 20 to 26. I think it would take you probably an additional month and a half. Whereas I think if you're 4-factioning, that could be as small as 3 weeks.
Having or not having the Nar is a 4 times faction, like multiplier on progression.
I think it's 2 to 3 times as fast.
Really?
I think the biggest point where gazing is going to beat faction is when you are going into 34, 35.
Sure. I disagree with that, but we're going to talk about this in a second. I think it's a little bit more mixed than that. But you think, I just want to clarify, you're going to be able to counter specific heroes that really bug Daemon, so you're going to be so effective, like your progression is going to go down by a factor of 4.
I think the best way to word it would be that the investment you would have on a Daemon team at that point would be probably a Mythic Thoran and like an Elite or an Elite plus Nara. Compared to if you are already summoning, your Thoran is going to be the same Ascension, and you're going to have another fully Ascended hero. That Pharah is going to be at A. Or you'll have that Thoran at A, and you'll be able to have a Nara at M. And I think the additional Ascended hero at that point in the game is that much progress.
Another Ascended hero is, okay, let's put a number on it. So having, let's say, like the core we agree on, Daemon Rowan, Brutus Thoran or something can be the 4 heroes, and then the last one is the one that you're focusing on getting while they're spiraling to the second part of their 4 factions. So we're not talking about like a second complete carry set. We're talking about a key factional hero that you're getting. For example, Nara.
Yep.
Or for example, Feral. Feral, I think, is even stronger for you, but it depends on how you want to play it. How much difference at that point, specifically at chapter 20 to chapter 23 and a half, if you have that hero or if you don't have? Like, how much time are we talking about? Like, what factor of time between that, like, passing this progression?
Progression is very quick. I've seen it happen many times where people get their first or second carry done, and they're moving up 2 chapters in a day. Are your levels going to carry you better than having additional heroes? And usually the answer would be yes. But I think the difference between these two is where it's going to change, because assuming equal levels, you're still going to move faster. And I think it's going to move faster by a decently significant margin.
But that is the question, I feel, and I'll explain later why it's so significant, is that at this early point, levels are going to be the deciding factor. So sure, if you get no Feral Ascended into your Daemon set, you'll be able to do a chapter and a half in a day. My argument is, if you don't have that Feral, you gain 10 levels, and you do that chapter and a half, like, in 2 days.
Yes.
Do you agree on that?
I'm talking like 10. Are you talking 10 levels on the weakest hero or 10 levels on your carry?
10 levels on your carry.
I don't think 10 levels on your carry is going to push you that far.
Really? Okay.
Usually it's a crystal threshold that pushes you far, or an extra skill level on your carry. 10 levels is not enough to do that.
All right, so this is going to be, I think, our first point where we disagree, which is fun. My claim is that this part, like the whole part from chapter 20, all the way to the point, I'll even take it farther than chapter 23, to chapter 26, like with or without a secondary hero to support your Daemon or your Aaron, you're talking about a total difference. I'm not even talking about like the accumulated difference between the sections. I'm talking about how much time would it take you building that hero or not building that hero. And I'm not even talking about the games that you would do otherwise. Just if you have an Ascended Feral or not, I think you're talking about a difference of, let's say, 2 weeks. I think in 2 weeks, the amount of XP that you can get on all your team, even like the side carries that you do end up getting, because I do advocate having some sort of level of faction heroes here, I feel like the difference is 2 weeks total between chapter 20 and 26, especially with mercenaries. But even without mercenaries, let's say you have a set. Assume you have a set. Your set is Daemon, Rowan, Thorin, Brutus. This is what we talked about.
Yes.
Debate, having Feral, or having, I don't know, what's like really average in that slot. Like Rosaline is a pretty average hero. Like you would have something, but it wouldn't be Feral, right?
Then yeah, Rosaline.
Rosaline, I feel like, so in chapter 20, you see this guy, he has his first meta carry, so much like what Arty was saying. And here they're level like 200 and a bit and 180. So Feral, it's 2 weeks. Arty, where do you put that difference?
I would put that difference between having an Ascended Thera and a better Thorin. I would put that difference at probably about a month.
Arty, a month.
Maybe bring it down to 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks. And this, some of you know what this is.
What is, is this what I think it is?
It is exactly what you think it is. No, I don't want to rely on it 100%. This is by in-season content creator for the community. Let's just try to use them as a benchmark. So, like, obviously it's not, like, estimating this on 100% the same case that we are. And this already obviously changed. Like, the reason I'm saying this obviously changed since the patch that he made this. This was a while back. But I want to talk about the difference. The total amount of time that he claimed it would take you to get to level 220 on the hardest resource if you're optimizing is 45 days, right?
Yes.
6.5 weeks. All right, I mean, we're kind of in the same boat here, but what I'm saying is that, 160, okay, he talked about this. Okay, 116 days total to get to 240. So 116, and this resource might be wrong, but it's the best I have off the top of my head. And Arty is saying this is going to be 19. So the argument is whether it's 18 or 19 total weeks of play at that point.
I think it would be lower than average. I think you'll be able to push higher chapters at a faster point where you're going to be getting more dust income.
All right, so you're talking about positive feedback loop. I would argue that is an argument that we need to have later when we get to the end game, because my argument would be that diminishing returns on the rewards are actually going to pay back when you get unstuck. But we'll talk about that in just a second.
Because either way, no matter what, you're going to push through early relatively fast. I think early and mid game, they do go by pretty fast.
And then my progression curve is that you get the first carry here, you get the second carry at 27, you get the third carry at 31, and then your progression curve is actually pretty smooth because 31 to 33 at that point, first of all, you have 3 good sets and you won't need a good 4th set until late chapter 33, and that's the time where people really start getting stuck. And I think 4 faction is still better at that range. But then I think like you'll be able to catch up very, very, very quickly at that point. Because since you've made the sacrifice earlier, you'll already have the twins, you'll already have Little Crochet, you already have the first factional carry. You need to get a second factional carry. You will have more levels because of the rewards that you're getting. You will have a lot more other side rewards that you do get. You will have better sets for TR, for example. If you do gaze, if you can set aside time to, for example, get an E plus Mortis. I know this is becoming a little bit messy to kind of handle because I'm saying a lot of different things. We'll cap it kind of here. I think if you do get to the 33 range, this is like 32, 33. This is the point of balance where if you've been able to optimally get the right heroes up until then, and if you're able to get your second carry twins, like a second set twins and then Source at 27, and if you're able to transition to choice summons and then almost entirely stargazing by late chapter 33, you will be able to grant all the carries and the sets that you need. Having said that, it will be less heroes overall, but it will be enough.
I'll just kind of address things one by one. I think, first of all, I don't think your TR gets much better by gazing versus not, because the only copies of heroes you really need is Twins and Mortis, which you're going to build anyways. Because any Saurus Grives team is going to get you Diamond to Legend consistently.
Twins, do you feel like are a hero that you get in 4 faction?
Twins are the hero you gaze for in 4 faction through your free stuff. So you're at this point, if you are going to have a Twins by this point, your Twins are going to be L plus to M.
At which point do you think 4 faction gets Twins? Because my claim, and maybe you disagree with that, and can get to that. My claim is you can get an Ascended Twins by chapter 27.
Yeah, I'm saying if you are going to have Ascended Twins at chapter 27, which even then I think is a little bit too early, but again, debatable points. I think if you're going to have Ascended Twins at 27, at that point, your 4 faction twins are going to be L plus to M. I'd want to go over is how many Ascended heroes are you thinking you're going to have by the time Twins are A or Lucretia is A? Well, I'm assuming that like you don't have fodder restrictions anyway. I'm assuming that like I'm just excluding fodders for other factions being pulled.
That's a big one because my claim is going to be like if you only reduce it to 8, then the number is going to be ridiculously low. But I think most boxes that you'll see between these chapters are going to be mad fodder block. This is exactly the points where people start sacrificing stuff like Isabella's. Sorry, not here, around here. We're talking about specifically like around where I say I'll get my Ascended Twins, around chapter 27.
You usually need fodder the most, I'd say, around that point, yes.
You could argue that because you have the option to get fodder, it's actually much better because obviously, like you don't need as many copies. I feel like that does disregard the fodder issue. So I'll leave the whole point where Ascended heroes versus like I'll leave the whole point of Celis Hypos to versus non-Celis Hypos aside.
Well, I'm thinking more so level cap. That's what I'm more worried about with this is the level cap. If you don't have enough raw heroes at Ascended, you're not going to be able to have the levels to do chapter 31, 32. Okay, someone just trolled up.
All right. So this is a good troll
jinxed
gaze.
it.
This is a good troll gaze. Like you can gauge how many trolls are in the chat by how many people are voting for a faction get stuck. My argument is you're able to get Twins and Lucretia. Both of them are able to fill complete sets. At the God Comp, you will have one viable carry, whether we're talking about Source or even if we're talking about Isold or something to that effect. At those level ranges, it works. Like at level 26, level 27, Isold God Comp is a great set. It's great later, but then it doesn't work because we've got fragmentation and stuff, but that's different. And later you're going to be able to get Lucretia, and Lucretia on her own is going to be a whole set of her own. So if you have the carry set, you have a couple heroes that are left over, and you can make the God Comp set. And then you use the rest as scraps from Lucretia. And then you can pave yourself a relatively decent way, given some people will get level stuck for a certain portion of the time, all the way up to chapter 32, which is where you start moving from 3 to 4 sets.
Yeah, I think a majority of the progress between 26 and like 32 is going to look nearly the same for both, but you're going to be more so power capped. So I don't really think having the gaze heroes versus not is going to change your progress at that point. You may be able to have a wider roster, but either way, if you're pushing while you're power capped. I'm not sure exactly how chapter 31, 32 looks for a gazer, but I do think I do think in general, if you're gazing, you're going to have a very similar progression point, even at that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're not going to struggle too hard on 31, 32, even if you are gazing early.
Mm-hmm. So you're not going to get stuck, but you are going to be a little bit behind on this because if you, I feel like I'll grant this, you do fall behind on at least one set. There's a few things that you did point out that I did not address in this part. Some of them because I feel like you have a point. Some of them that I just didn't address. I feel like the ones I'm willing to grant are those. I'm willing to grant that progress with 4 faction up to chapter 33 at the very least is optimal. If you do pure 4 faction up to chapter 32, 33, you're going to be able to run the sets that we talked about earlier with Arty here, which is going to be Thorin, Daemon, Aaron, Portal Party, and Isol. Sometimes some people do Gwyneth.
Totally forgot that hero existed.
Yeah, well, let's say your benchmark, it's a race to chapter 33. And up until now has been the part where you're happy in this debate, where you're essentially 4 factions better. I think now it's going to... I'm going to try to make the case that now it flips. Let's say we're in a race to chapter 33 and we're both playing optimally. I gaze, I do my strategy with the gazing, which means that at chapter 22, I start transitioning towards gazes. I do less choice summons, eventually get to the point where I almost ultimately Stargaze and choice summon by chapter 27. And you're going all the way for a faction. And the race, the end point is chapter 33.
By how much you'll be ahead by about a month at that point.
Wait, I will be ahead? If I Stargaze, I will get to chapter 33.
No. I think that the 4 faction player will be ahead by about a month. I think when you start hitting multis, power cap is less relevant. And it's more so just, can you beat the stage, which usually with Mercs you can. So I feel like it then becomes more so just race for levels and having a decent roster.
All right. Well then, I mean, I thought we'll have an argument, but man, that's my estimate. I feel like the 2 weeks become a month. You said the 3 weeks become a month. Okay. So at chapter 33, the difference we're talking about is about a month. This is, I feel like, is right. I think that the sacrifice, like my case here, is that you start making the sacrifices around the chapter 20s. You don't have all the support that you otherwise would be for your 4 faction. But boy, oh boy, do I feel like that comes back. Because from 33 to 35, you can't see the rest of this, but the chapters become increasingly more difficult. Now, Arty, I wonder where you stand on this, because obviously, where I stand on this. This is the point where I believe Stargazing becomes optimal. How do you feel? What do you feel like? Let's say the end of the race is chapter 30, the start of chapter 35, because we've both got there. What do you feel that happens? Who do you feel is ahead over there, and by how much?
Assuming your strategy, I think Orthros is the bottom of the list for gaze priorities right now.
All right, then we can talk about it later. I also think that Mortis E has jumped. I feel like Alna has jumped because this was very initial. I didn't want to overhype it. Alna ascended and Mortis E both jump up.
You'll have 6 total.
Because the case I'm making is that the amount, the length and the progression, the rewards and the events and everything from 20 to 32, is half the time that it takes you to get from the end of 32 to 35.
Yeah.
And that's purely because of how chapter 34 scales.
Mm-hmm.
So here, I think you're going to have 4 more. And if you have 4 more, it's going to be Talene, Mahira, Zoroath, and Alna. And maybe an E copy of Mortis for good measure. Maybe you can cancel one.
I can see having about 6 if you've been hard gazing. I think then we need to look at the 4 faction thing, because I don't think with 4 faction you never gaze with diamonds. I think you wait until about 25 to 30 ascended heroes. Usually you're at that point at around 32 to 33. I would say 25 ascended heroes, chapter 33.
Chat, you got to remember events. All right, so I'm putting here at chapter 25 ascended hero, chapter 33. Everyone needs to gaze according to Arty.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right.
Yep.
This is a big difference, by the way. This is the range where most people who start wondering about this kind of content are. And I feel like this is a good argument. I think that 4 faction is actually going to be significantly slower when they start gazing. So much so that I'm going to put a number on how much slower they are going to be. And I'm going to put it in 3 months.
I think that is very off, but I think that it will be maybe slightly faster with gazing. I don't think it is much of a significant point, because I think already you are going to at this point, if you're going into 33, 34, you're going to have your twins, Alna, and your Lucretia.
Wait, if like, do make your case. Do you feel like they're equal? Do you feel like it's ahead? Do you feel like it's behind?
Very equal. The three major heroes that Gazing would have that for faction wouldn't. You said what? Zolrath, you said Mahira, and what was the other one? No. I'm saying just in total, at that point, you're going to have about 3 to 4 done compared to the like 6 to 7 that you'd be working on as a gazer. I think 35 is then when a big change comes. I think if you're pushing through 35, I do think Gazing is better. I think at that point, your Gazing progression would have been much better because you're getting the extra levels, and that's the big wall in 35.
All right. So, and can we agree that after 35, like if you gazed, you're better off because like getting into 36, if you're behind on the gaze here was like, it's really, really hard to cut it like at that point because you will be needing stuff.
Rory, we're assuming you have just hit chapter 35.
All right. So let's see where we agree and where we disagree. What we agree about is this. We agree that 4 faction is more effective up to chapter 33. So if you're going up to chapter 33 and you do 4 faction, at that point you'll be ahead. By how much, we do not exactly agree. We had a little argument here. You should definitely listen. Like we argued a bit of middle point. Arty does agree with me later that it becomes about a month at 33. But at 26, we feel like the difference is most significant to the point you're playing. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
All right. So up to chapter 26, this is like where you're really going to feel it hard because if you gaze, like if you go gazing, you sacrifice earlier. So until chapter 33, 4 faction is going to be ahead. Then it's kind of gonna equalize, and eventually at chapter 35 and forward, it's gonna be better. That's what we agree about, like to gaze.
Yes, I do agree on that. And then I also do think it's worth mentioning, once again, spenders, usually gazing is just going to be better. You're going to have more resources. You don't need to worry too much about a lot of the restrictions for faction has. And if you're making mistakes, usually it's more optimal to put a bit earlier into faction just to make up for those.
I will make the case that if you made mistakes, actually 4 faction is going to be more kind to you because if you go ahead and you gaze your Chimera, then you're in a bad place. The points we disagree about is I think that the gazing sacrifice is smaller than Arty. I think overall it closes towards chapter 33. Gazing is in for a steady and healthy progression over there and forward. Like I think it's much earlier. Arty is saying that gazing is going to be less efficient. Arty also mentioned a positive feedback loop where if you are able to progress earlier, sometimes if you're really, really good, you will be able to use those resources. I said that the rewards from stargazing are underappreciated. I said that in the long range, fodder will be eventually useless. I think we agreed about that, but we did not agree about when exactly does the positive feedback loop exactly start to play and how much better is it and how much longer you're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, we agree that if you're not playing towards the very long term, if you're not planning towards the end game, if you're not oriented towards very late progression, you should do 4 faction. And if you're oriented towards very end, like if you're talking about the very end of progression, you should do gazing.
Yep, I can agree with those.
Yeah, and I think we had a pretty good debate. I think we raised most stuff. Do you have any closing words?
I think just a few small things. Usually, when it comes to giving advice for newer players, I think 4 factions better just because there's a lot more room for errors and usually a lot more fun to be had in having a wider roster. Newer players, it's usually easier if you aren't as invested into the game and don't know how to min-max very well. That is better to 4 faction.
All right, and I'll say for final words that first of all, I agree. I think like there's a lot more room for error. I think people that watch my channel are typically the type that try to figure everything out by chapter 22. And I also really want to thank you for coming on, Arty. I think this was awesome. I really can't think.
It was fun to be on.
First of all, you're very well versed and you hold your own. And second, I really respect your opinion and what you're saying. And lastly, people, Arty's going to publish a guide soon. Arty's actually going to publish a hot guide about formations and everything like that. So definitely follow AFKArena on Reddit.
2 days or so. Just we're doing final touches today and getting some reviews for all the rosters.
All right, YouTube Linker back here. Definitely a lot of interesting points and hot takes to explain what goes behind the decisions. We didn't prepare ahead of time. I just kind of brought Arty on stream, so the numbers weren't always there 100%, but the arguments are essentially the same. Big props for Arty for coming in, having the courage to come on my platform, and thank you for listening all the way through. And for now, I hope I've helped you, and I've been Linker. Peace.